Welcome to the 700 Club. The pressure is increasing on Israel to downsize its operations in Gaza. The Biden administration is calling for more targeted attacks on Hamas to protect civilians.
Well, Israel's clear it's not backing down on its military campaign, nor is it willing to accept a Palestinian state when the war is over. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan for U.S. support in supplying munitions, blocking UN attempts for a ceasefire, and assistance in returning the hostages. But Sullivan pressured Israeli leaders to shift from all-out war on Hamas by airstrikes and ground assaults in Gaza to more targeted operations. This amid a growing rift between Israel and the U.S. over civilian casualties, wrapping up the war and the future of Gaza.
He did talk about possible transitioning from what we would call high-intensity operations, which is what we're seeing them do now, to lower-intensity operations sometime, in the near future. But I don't want to put a timestamp on it. I think you can understand that the last thing we'd want to do is telegraph to Hamas what they're likely to face in coming weeks and months.
President Biden emphasized protecting civilian lives while continuing the campaign against Hamas.
I want them to be focused on how to save civilian lives, not stop going after Hamas, but be more careful.
Today, Sullivan meets with the leaders of the Palestinian Authority to discuss its role in the future of Gaza and the region. Israeli President Isaac Herzog said security is first and foremost in future negotiations.
I truly believe in a horizon of peace. I believe it's feasible. But before getting there, we have to deal with some core issues, the behavioral mode of our partners, and how do we secure the safety and well-being of Israelis and Palestinians.
Israel's ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Hotovely, went a step further, telling British broadcaster Sky News there's no negotiating with Hamas and no chance for the two-state solution that was laid out 30 years ago in the Oslo Accords.
I think it's about time for the world to realize the Oslo paradigm failed on the 7th of October, and we need to build a new one. The reason the Oslo Accords failed is because the Palestinians never wanted to have a state next to Israel. They want to have a state from the river to the sea.
As the fighting continues, the IDF says dozens of Hamas terrorists are surrendering.
Instead of pictures that we're used to seeing of military parades, we saw pictures of dozens of terrorists, today included, coming out of their hiding place in a hospital in Jabalia with raised weapons and giving themselves in for interrogation by the IDF forces and the General Security Service.
Meanwhile, heightened alert in Europe as German and Dutch officials arrested 4 suspected terrorists alleged to be members of Hamas in plots to attack Jewish institutions. At about the same time, in an unrelated case, Denmark and the Netherlands arrested 4 others suspected of terror-related offenses. In Israel, people celebrated the last day of Hanukkah with prayers and memorials for the hostages. In Jerusalem's Old City, Hanukkahs were lit for each of the more than 130 hostages. Rabbi Moshe Zeldman said lighting the candles is like sending up a flare, an SOS to God.
I need you to come to me, to lift me up, to pick me up. Because sometimes I'm just so overwhelmed that I can't get it together on my own.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
The international community should continue to put pressure on Hamas. There can't be peace until the hostages are released, until Hamas unconditionally surrenders, lays down all their weapons, and says, we can't continue anymore. We understand the outrage that the international community has based on October 7th. We saw the face of evil that day. Let's not turn away in some vain pursuit of peace. When you look back at the Oslo Accords, Yasser Arafat was quite specific that he couldn't come to a two-state solution at that point in time. The reason being, if he said Israel has a right to exist and there can be a two-state solution that could lead to a lasting peace, he was well aware that he would have been assassinated. In the 75-year history of Israel, every Arab leader that came to peace, whether it was the King of Jordan all the way back in 1948, or Anwar Sadat in Egypt, they were assassinated. And it was very public to say, no, you cannot recognize Israel. There's no peace, there's no negotiation, there's no recognition. Those are the three no's, and they've been echoing throughout history. So to hold on to some illusion that this could happen without a change in the ideology of the Palestinian, you're not going to get to peace. Keep in mind, Hamas was elected. We want to say that this is some kind of terror group, but they are a terror group. But they're also a government. They're the government of Gaza. And in that government, they have launched horrific attacks against Israel and have done so for years. October 7th is just a horror that you can't come back from. You can't look away. This has to end. The international community needs to join, and I'll specifically call out Qatar. Here's a nation that back in the first Gulf War, we said to Iraq, you can't come in, you can't take over Kuwait, you can't have all of these things, you can't take have some kind of regional power structure, you can't do that. They were our ally, but they're spending $100 million a year to Hamas. They're providing refuge for the leaders of Hamas. They enjoy protection from our military, but in that protection, they're funding a terror group, they're funding a terrorist government of Gaza. That needs to stop. We all need to recognize it, and we all need to hold them accountable. Well, here in America, the vast majority of Jews are considered politically liberal. Well, since the October attack against Israel, many of them feel betrayed by those they once considered ideological friends. CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody, has the story.
One major result of the Hamas attack and subsequent war in Gaza has been an alarming rise in anti-Semitism, notably from the left in America.
Palestine will never die!
From student groups on college campuses
Go back to Poland! Go back to Germany!
To Jews attacked at rallies. With groups like Democratic Socialists of America promoting pro-Hamas rallies, it's left progressive Jews wondering what's going on in their world.
To be clear, you are not a feminist if you can't feel for the Israeli civilian women, children, and babies who were murdered. And so I'm very angry about what I'm hearing.
This week, we entered the upside-down world when a retrograde, regressive, totalitarian, misogynistic, messianic, terrorist regime became, for the time being, the hero of the left. How could it be?
It shouldn't come as a complete surprise. A Harvard-Harris poll shows 36% of liberals see the Hamas attack on Israeli civilians as justified. Among 18 to 24-year-olds, a majority, 51%, say the killings could be justified. Overall, Gallup shows Democrats are more sympathetic to the Palestinians than the Israelis, 49% versus 38%. Democrat strategists like Joel Rubin believe if the left abandons progressive Jews who love Israel, there will be a political price.
If you kick out the Jews from the Jews who care about Israel from progressive coalitions, these progressive coalitions will have no political power, and they will go down the rabbit hole of looking like anti-Semites. One should be able to support Israel and being Jewish and still be progressive. But that is now becoming a litmus test in progressive coalitions.
Historically, anti-Semitism has existed worldwide in these circles.
The National Socialist Nazi Party, they were left of center. You know, the textbook definition of socialism is the state controls the means of production and distribution. And that is what Hitler advocated.
Today, liberal Jews break bread with the left on issues of abortion, gay and transgender rights, as well as overall social justice. A split grows, however, between the left and Israeli-supporting Jews when it comes to defending Palestinians and terrorists.
I am somewhat shocked that people would embrace Hamas, because there's nothing progressive about Hamas, right? This idea you have queers for Hamas or feminists for Hamas when they would kill these people or, force them not to drive or not to work if they're women is just bizarre.
Caroline Glick, contributing editor for the Jewish News Syndicate, sees that leading liberal Jews to fight back.
You're seeing a lot of Jews who major donors to universities pulling their donations, quitting boards and other major institutions because they're suddenly realizing that they've been giving many millions of dollars to institutions that have become institutionally anti-Semitic.
It's a growing dynamic that progressive Jews may find they have to push through the pain in order to confront. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Well, I hope they do push through the pain and wake up to it. I actually hope all liberals in America wake up to the danger of Hamas. How can you possibly support a radical Islamic movement? Do you really believe in what they do to women? Do you really believe in honor killings? Do you really believe you can be beaten to death if you don't wear your scarf right? This is the ideology that they're supporting, and when I see their support throughout college campuses, I go, do you have any idea what it would be like to live in that environment, to live under that kind of culture, that kind of government? Then we have to take a look at history. And how did the National Socialists arise in Germany in order to take control of that country and then turn it into a war engine that took the whole world into World War II? It was because they were socialists, and they were saying, we will stand against the communists, but we still believe that the state should control everything, and that there should be a leader of that state, the Fuhrer, and everyone should fall into agreement with that leader. That's totalitarianism. And whether that totalitarianism comes under the name National Socialist or comes under the name Communist, when you see that take over, they always go after the minorities. They always go after the Jews. Let's wake up to that reality. I'm hearing a lot of calls in America that our democracy is at stake. And I think we need to take a step back and say, our liberty is at stake. Have we invested so much that there are government solutions or that some wave of sweeping legislation will change things? We need to protect individual liberty, and we need to protect the minorities in America. That's the principle we stand on, that you have freedom of conscience, you have freedom of belief, you have freedom of assembly. Send us your poor, you're tired, you're weary. We will receive them in. We'll give them freedom. We'll give them liberty. Let's hold to that standard and insist that every elected politician holds to that standard.